Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans, and I have a special show today because Dr. Mark Hitchcock is joining me, and we're going to be talking about some current events, some incredible things that are in the news, and we're going to be answering your questions. And so I'll introduce him in just a second. Let me say thank you to everyone who was a part of the Tipping Point Conference. It was fantastic. We had such a great time, and you can still get it now in times.com. You can still get the full conference, the one that we live streamed, and you can watch it for up to 30 days. And so it's going to be it was a fantastic conference. Thank you for all, I got to meet a lot of you there. It was great to meet you, but thank you for coming. I hope you had a wonderful time. All of you who were there physically, also all of you who live streamed. There were lots of folks all over the world who live streamed that event. We're going to be doing it again next year, so you can go ahead and get your tickets for next year if you want to on endtimes.com. In several weeks on October the 10th through the 12th, I'm doing a pastor school. For many years, I've done a pastor school. I pastored for 30 years, and the church that I pastored grew from 900 to over 10,000 during the time that I was pastoring. Absolutely love pastoring, and I love teaching pastors and people on church staffs and elders and people how to do church. So pastor school is that. It's how to build a healthy church. If you have a healthy church, it's going to grow and it's going to be able to minister to the people who are there the way it should. And so October 10th through the 12th, I'll be joined by Pastor Jimmy Witcher, who is the pastor of the church I used to pastor, doing a fantastic job, Dr. John Chastain of Victory Church in Oklahoma City and also of Grapevine, Texas. These two pastors, veteran pastors, who both lead very successful churches, I will be teaching there along with them. I'm teaching on church government. I'm teaching on philosophies, healthy philosophies of ministry. We're talking about assimilation, how to assimilate people into your church, which is a big challenge. We're talking about finances, how to lead your church financially, whatever level of leadership that you're in. We have many, many different topics that we're talking about. We're also going to be talking about just taking care of yourself, how to deal with your own soul related to leadership. And so we've got a lot of great topics, a lot of great ministry. Now, my son and I, on October 10th, on Tuesday, we're going to have just a meet and greet there. If whoever wants to come for that, we're going to meet you. We're going to take you on a tour of our XO facility here and take you out to dinner. And then we're going to have the next day begins the conference, and we're going to have the 2-day conference. It's all day from 9 to 4 on the Wednesday, and on the 11th, it goes until noon, from 9 until noon. And so it's $299 a person. If you bring a group of 5 or more, it's $199, and you can go to pastorschool.com for more information or to sign up. And so I just say, send your pastor here, send the church staff here. Even if you're not in church leadership, you can send your pastor here or encourage them to come. But if you're a senior pastor, if you're executive pastor, if you're on staff, if you're a worship leader, if you're a campus pastor, a children's pastor, whoever you are, an elder, come to this pastor school. I promise you, you'll learn a lot. But this is a small group now. This is under 100 people. We keep it low, or a lower number, so it's very intimate. We'll have a lot of interaction, a lot of Q&A. There'll be a lot of teaching, but a lot of interaction. This is going to be a very special time. So go to pastorschool.com to sign up or for more information. I'd love to see you there. I'm honored to have joining me today Dr. Mark Hitchcock, and he is a regular contributor here on Tipping Point, and he's also the senior pastor of Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. He's a brilliant theologian, and he's written over 30 books on the end times. Mark, great to have you with me today.
Yeah, great to be with you.
You did a great job at the conference. I thought your message on 2 Thessalonians was fantastic. I hope everybody that didn't hear it, I hope they'll be able to get to hear that, because 2 Thessalonians is such a phenomenal text.
It is.
Related to the end times, and you broke it down so beautifully.
Well, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of unique stuff there, about the removal of the restrainer and about the rebuilt temple and also and about the Antichrist. So, yeah, it's a very unique passage. So, yeah, that's what I do here at the church. I go through passages of the Bible every week. So I thought at a prophecy conference, it'd be a good thing to do, just take a text and go through it. So I enjoyed that.
Well, you're a theologian, and you've written over 30 books on the end times, and you have such a mastery of the topic. And, for everyone, it's just good to hear it laid out so carefully so that we can understand it. So we're going to talk about some issues that are in the news, and there's some unbelievable stuff. I keep thinking every week, I'm going to run out of things to talk about, and every week I look at the news like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So this is the article, the title of this, and this is Prophecy News Watch, is How a Cashless Society is a Precursor to Enforcing the Mark of the Beast. Now, this is amazing. Let me read some of this article. Joe Rogan is a comedian, podcast host, and UFC commentator. His podcast, which I do not endorse with the rank language he often uses, and I'm reading from the article here, has over 15 million subscribers. He's a major influencer in our culture today, and an unbeliever. A couple of weeks ago, he had a guest named Duncan Trussell, who is a stand-up comic, writer, and actor. Surprisingly, they discussed for quite some time how a cashless society is a precursor to enforcing the mark of the beast. During his program, Joe Rogan asked, how long before we're a cashless society? Trussell responded, hopefully forever. It is so scary to imagine losing privacy completely because every transaction is in the public eye and is observable. This is where I get scared because it is too similar to the mark of the beast. Now, these are two unbelievers talking.
Yeah, sure.
It's too similar. That's amazing. He says it is too similar to exactly what the Bible says in the book of Revelation. You won't be able to trade, you won't be able to do anything unless you have the mark, unless you bear the mark. This response led Joe Rogan to say, how's the mark of the beast described in the Bible? I think we're onto something here. Rogan then pulled up the Bible and read from Revelation 13, a section that describes the coming false prophet, a kind of second in command or the lieutenant of the coming Antichrist, who is going to make an image to him. The influential podcast host read this entire section live on his broadcast. This is a well-known unbeliever talking at length about the mark of the beast, reading the book of Revelation, making this connection between a cashless society and the rise of the Antichrist. On the heels of that conversation, the new Amazon One technology is about to go nationwide. And then it goes on to talk about all the different cashless mechanisms that are coming into play at ballparks, at grocery stores, and all the things like that. Isn't that amazing, Mark, that Joe Rogan and his guests will be talking about the mark of the beast?
Well, it is. It just shows how there's just kind of this collective sense out there that people have that where this world's headed, and we're getting near closing time. I thought it was fascinating. I listened to that. I don't listen to Joe Rogan all the time, again, because of what the person said. A lot of his stuff's a little bit rank. But I listened to that, and one of the things I thought was fascinating is he even was trying to pronounce the Greek word charagma, which is the word for mark, and he was trying to figure out, what that word means, and I think somebody must have texted him while he was talking there, and he kind of gave a little bit of that, but then he talked about how like it's a tattoo or a brand or something like that. So it's just out there in our world today, you have people who don't even know anything about the Bible at all, yet they know about this idea of the mark of the beast. They know about this coming cashless society, and it's something they're openly talking about. It's just another, kind of indicator of where our world is today.
Yeah, it really is. It's if you understand the implications of a cashless society, it's terrifying.
Oh, yes.
Because the COVID told us that, the dictatorial nature of much of the government. In fact, the world government today is dictatorial. The World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, they want to dictate to us. And this is an article, and I think you've got one like it there, UN's vision of the future, one digital ID to rule us all. And I'm reading from the article now. The United Nations recently published 3 new policy briefs to provide more detail on certain proposals contained in our common agenda. The UN Secretary General's vision for the future of global cooperation that will be decided at the Summit of the Future in September 2024. These briefings, a global digital compact, reforms to the international financial architecture, and the future of outer space governance sets out a chilling course for the future. Among the proposals are a new apex body in charge of the entire financial system that will enhance its coherence and align its priorities with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This could, according to Secretary General Antonio Guterres, be done through a biennial summit between the Group of 20, Economic and Social Council, the Secretary General, and heads of international financial institutions. This will further integrate the G20 with the United Nations into a body that can be described as an economic security council. It also seems like a perfect nest for the apex predators that run the international banking system. A vital part of the agenda is also a digital connectivity and the establishment of a global digital compact. This can be described as a cybernetic organ consisting of a digitally connected network of people, entities, devices, and things that can easily be directed by those who run the system. And then goes on to talk about the last of this article, a digital ID can help unlock new opportunities, but can also introduce risks and challenges that can be used to undermine human rights, for example, by enabling civil society to be targeted or select groups to be excluded from social benefits. This is the mark of the beast. I mean, this when I read that, the UN, in conjunction with the G20 and international business leaders, are coming into a digital global compact, and they will decide the values of the financial system and who can use that financial system.
That's right. And China already has all these things in place too, so they would join with that easily. But yeah, there's an article that I ran across, the same thing. It says G20. They met in India just this last week, unveils global digital currency plan. And that says that G20 leaders agreed to build infrastructure for digital currencies and IDs. So along with these IDs, you have a digital currency where they're able to, track your money, trace your money, control what you spend. Your money is expirable. But it says at the G20 summit in New Delhi, leaders from the world's leading rich and developing nations have agreed to a plan to implement digital currencies and digital IDs. This comes amid concern that governments might use digital currencies and IDs to monitor their people's spending and crush dissent. Well, that's exactly what the point of it is. So, people already know what it's about before it even happens. But they'll implement then probably something like China's social credit score, decide how people can spend their money.
Yeah.
So all of this, coalescing, you have these IDs, but then the digital currency along with that is exactly what they need. And it's a lot easier to control the world economically than it is militarily or politically.
That's exactly right.
So the economic feature of this, and that's why it's called the World Economic Forum. It's about economics, that they want economic control to begin with and these global IDs. And once you have that, then basically you're able to subjugate really the entire population of the world.
Absolutely. Well, the World Health Organization is trying to get a treaty passed that would give them global governance, not the elected leaders. This would be over the United States, over all the countries of the world. If this treaty goes through, and they're trying to get it through by 2024, and I'm going to have Michelle Bachmann, former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, on the show here in a few weeks, and we're going to be talking about this. But everything is looking forward to global control. The World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the G20, the United Nations, they're all talking about digital, and the World Health Organization is talking about a digital passport that you can't get around. You would not be able to travel unless you've been vaccinated or been boosted or whatever. They'll make the rules, but they can unilaterally come into any nation and declare an emergency and shut them down, shut the schools down, shut the businesses down. It's unbelievable.
Well, and you mentioned the year 2030. It's interesting how often that date keeps popping up. Climate change, people are saying that, 2030 is the year it's going to be irreversible. Kind of to use the title of your book, that's the tipping point. The year 2030 is going to be this climate change tipping point. Just this week, you have Saudi Vision 2030. You have the Agenda 2030 of the World Economic Forum. You have the 2030 Agenda of the United Nations. You mentioned that date a bit ago, and I think there's even Egypt Vision 2030. Everybody seems to have 2030. Everything that's out there, it's all happening by 2030. I just think that's interesting. You have this date that's out there that all these key issues are tied to. The World Bank has called for all the countries in the world to implement universal health care by 2030. The World Health Organization and UNICEF want global access to basic sanitation, which certainly we're all for, but they want that by 2030. So you can just go through and put in 2030 and just find out all these different agendas that really coalesce around that year. It's interesting. Why that year? Why has that year been picked?
Well, that's very interesting. This can't go on forever. The technology, the world events, Iran, Russia, you look at all the things. It is coming together. At some point, it's going to let go. Ray Kurzweil, by the way, Mark, he's the chief engineer for Google. He said by 2030, humans will be hybrids. They're looking at, by the time we get there, that we'll begin to interface. It will be common by that point. Well, Elon Musk has Neuralink, the chip that goes in your head. which has some good uses, Parkinson's and that kind of stuff. But he also wants to put that in children's brains and to link them up to the cloud so they can be educated dramatically faster. And so there are some very, you put that together with AI, that's a pretty, scary kind of a deal. 2030 is 7 years from right now. And so it would be interesting to see, if by 2030 we're in the tribulation or, getting close to the tribulation or something like that. But everything is coming together and everything is getting worse. I don't see anything getting better, including the church.
Right.
Now, there are places in Iran, for example, there's a revival in Iran, but you look at the church in America, we're struggling. We're losing members.
Sure.
People are turning away from God.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the speech that opened the UN General Assembly this week, Antonio Guterres, who's the UN General Secretary, he opened the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, said the world is becoming unhinged as geopolitical tensions rise and the world seems incapable of coming together to respond to mounting global challenges. So, the world's becoming unhinged. Well, we see that, but the world's incapable of coming together to respond to these challenges. Well, one of these days after the rapture, the world is going to come together. And that's what they want.
Exactly
And that's
right.
what they're seeking and desiring. And of course, it's going to happen under one man with all these IDs and central bank digital currencies and all this control. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, here this man is saying the world's unhinged. And that's exactly what we're saying. And that's kind of what Joe Rogan was saying as well in some ways.
Yeah. Well, and the Antichrist is going to step into that void, and he's going to bring the world together. And, we know the rest of that story. Read your article about Cuba.
Yes, there's some real interesting things happening in Cuba. I saw an article that says, are we headed for a second Cuban Missile Crisis? Now, I was really small when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, so I don't remember it directly. And a lot of, folks that are younger, it's kind of a faint memory. But 1962, huge event, obviously, as Russia or Soviet Union at that time was going to put, nuclear missiles down on Cuba. But what's fascinating is Russia right now is desperate. Vladimir Putin's met with Kim Jong-un. They're buying weapons from Iran. But also, there's been people arrested, Russians arrested, or people, Cubans working with the Russians have been arrested down in Cuba where they're trafficking and getting Cubans to go fight with the war in Ukraine. So Russia is getting soldiers from Cuba to come help fight in Ukraine. They're trafficking people there. Some are joining voluntarily, but others are trafficking in these getting men to go fight in Russia. So it shows how badly this is going for Russia. But also Cuba's prime minister visited Moscow back in June, and there's a growing number of naval vessels, Russian naval vessels visiting Cuba, especially nuclear submarines. And there's a growing Russian naval presence down in Cuba, of course, just 90 miles off of the coast of Florida. And many are fearing, is this going to be a new Cuban Missile Crisis where the United States is going to tell Russia, you can't have these nuclear submarines docking there and going in and out of there, because obviously that's a lot more difficult to track. If someone has a base down there sitting on Cuba. So, Russia right now, they're desperate. I think they're a wounded bear from what's going on in Ukraine, and they're kind of reaching out now wherever they can in the world. And I think it makes Russia more dangerous now, really, than they've ever been.
Yes. I totally agree with that. I was 9 years old and I came home from school one day, and my mother was crying and she was cleaning out pots and vessels for water. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "We're going to war with Russia." And it was very imminent. And we were having nuclear drills in our schools, having to get under our desk and stuff, like that's going to help in a nuclear bomb. But I remember she was terrified.
Sure.
And the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was a big deal at that point. The world is so dangerous. China, Russia, I totally agree with you when you say they're a wounded bear. And Ezekiel 38, 39, it's written to a man named Gog. He's the leader of this coalition. Well, I don't know that Vladimir Putin is Gog, but whoever this Gog is going to have a coalition of nations that include Iran, Turkey, all these countries. And he's going to be anti-Semitic, especially in the sense that it says that you come for booty and plunder. The Ezekiel 38 tells us the reason that they come. In fact, what I believe is Russia comes for booty and plunder. The Muslim nations come to take the land away, because it says they come to take a land that's been regathered from the nations. And so, 10 years ago, Mark, 20 years ago, you would say, well, why in the world would Russia invade Israel? There's nothing there. There's 31 trillion cubic feet of natural gas there. And Israel's in direct competition with Russia in the energy issue there in Europe to supply Europe. So it's a very, very unstable situation.
Yeah, Vladimir Putin, we can't say that he's God, but I've mentioned this several times, but Joel Rosenberg, I like what he says. He says, Putin is Gog-esque. And I like that. He's Gog-esque. I mean, he's exactly what this person Gog would be like. He could be Gog, or he could just be the foreshadow, of Gog. Yeah. But all that he's doing, and reaching out right now to North Korea. Whenever Kim Jong-un comes and visits Russia, he's reaching out now to people that he wouldn't have reached out to before to try to make deals.
That's right.
And it's because he's desperate. Things, you hear different reports about how things are going there in the war between Russia and Ukraine, but certainly Russia's military is being massively degraded during this whole situation. So he's having to reach out, to Cuba, and trying to get soldiers to come fight from there. So the thing that's dangerous about this, I think, is, a lot of people say, well, if Russia's defeated in this, Russia's not going to be defeated. They'll do whatever they have to do ultimately to win. Now, there may be some kind of a peace agreement, but if it comes down to it, Russia has more nuclear weapons than anybody in the world. And Ukraine has none, because of what we did back in the early 90s and getting them to give those up. But Russia's not going to lose. They can use tactical nuclear weapons, so they're not going to lose in Ukraine. They'll at least come out with a stalemate. And so, but the more wounded they are, the more dangerous I think they become, and the more radical their responses can be to what's happening over there.
Well, Bill, I had Bill Salas on the show about a month ago, and we were talking about the Jeremiah 49 Elam, the judgment on Elam, southern Iran. And because he has a book talking about all the wars that are coming up. Right. He believes the first war that's going to happen will be Elam, and that will be like the hook in the jaw. That'll set into place Psalm 83 war, which is the regional war, and then Ezekiel 38 and all that. But it's a tinderbox, and Iran kicked a third of the IAEA inspectors. They kicked a third of them out this week, won't let them inspect nuclear sites. They just got $6 billion for releasing 5 of our hostages or whatever. So in Iran, the IAEA was shocked at how much progress Iran has made in the centrifuges and enriching uranium. So it's just everything is moving toward something bad. Yes. What the Bible says. Gog, Magog, everything. Yeah,
that's right. There's just a convergence of all these things that are taking place on every front, and in our own country as well. We see the debt in our own nation right now that's going to ultimately, it could be one of the things that brings America down as well. We see all the lawlessness, just in our own country. There's people are, even believers, many believers are disheartened by what they see. But we always want to remember and set before ourselves and before others the hope that we have in Jesus Christ, in the rapture, and getting up every day. And in the midst of a world like this, to live lives that are filled with joy, the joy of the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
Knowing that our future is secure, and trying to reach out to as many people we can around us to make sure that they are partaking of this glorious future that we have as well.
That's exactly right. A lot of people and I brought a message at the conference on Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled. That was the last message I brought about, just worry, fear, anxiety, and all those things. And there is an answer for it that we have. And Jesus said, when you see these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your head. And one of the reasons that we do Tipping Point and Marking the End Times and all that we do on endtimes.com is to help people stay encouraged and to know that the things we're seeing in the world are announcing the coming of Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we're here. That's why we had the conference last week, and we need more conferences like that right now. What's sad is right now, the time when we live, we need to be talking about the Lord's coming more and more, and yet in most churches and most places, it's rarely ever talked about. It's totally neglected.
That's exactly right.
It's upside down.
That's right. Yeah. So let's answer some questions here from some of our subscribers. This is Norma, And she said, given the imminent return of Jesus and assuming all of our loved ones are raptured, what happens to believers' assets like our homes, businesses, or bank accounts? Should we start shredding sensitive documents, or does it matter once we're raptured?
Well, in one sense, I don't want to sound too crass, but I guess in one way I'd say, who cares? Yeah, we won't care about that stuff
That's right.
that time. And, I've actually had people ask me, should I put something in my will about the rapture, if I disappear and I'm gone for some length of time? Or, I guess you could do that, but I'm not sure that by the time they could actually prove what happened to you and you were gone, what would happen to someone's property? That is an interesting question, though. What will happen? Will people just move into people's houses that are gone? All the assets we have. I'm not sure that that we can take every eventuality into account. But if there is something that you can do with if you're getting elderly and something you can do to maybe go ahead and give money away to your family or whatever you want to do. That might be a way to avoid that happening, just being left there. But that's an interesting question, but I'm not really sure what you can do legally to take all these things into account.
I've had several people, we talk about prepping and because, we've got some food, 2 or 3 months of food on hand and some things for any emergency, just a natural disaster or something like that. Not for the tribulation, because we're not going to be here. But I've had some people say that they have stuff stored for the people who are left behind.
Okay.
Because people are going to be in our homes.
Sure.
They're going to break into our homes. There are 2 billion people in the world right now who claim to be Christians. If half of those are sincere Christians, 1 billion people are going to get raptured one day.
Wow.
Well, when 1 billion people leave the earth, it's going to be cataclysmic. And so there are going to be people looting. There are going to be people moving into our homes and squatting in our homes and things like that. And so I think one of the things, I don't think it matters. I'm like you. Who cares? We're gone. Have a good time. Read all my private stuff. But on the other hand, I like the book that I wrote with my daughter. Where are the missing people? It's for leaving in your home, so people find it after the rapture and read it and get saved. But for the most part, I think the best thing you can do is understand unbelievers are going to, because they're all going to be unbelievers at that point. Unbelievers are going to be going through my stuff, and I want to prepare my stuff in a way that they can hear the gospel, and that if they're hungry, they can eat or something like that. I think that's very considerate.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
This is Karen. Matthew 27 speaks of many believers who were raised from the dead after the curtain in the temple was torn in two. It says they appeared to many people. I do not see anything else about this in the Bible. Is it mentioned anywhere else or in any other historical accounts? How long did they appear to people? At some point, should we assume they were taken to heaven also? Now, this is Matthew 27. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. And so the neat thing to me about this, Mark, is it wasn't just Jesus who got resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
That was the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there were many, and they weren't resurrected. I guess they were resuscitated, or however you say it. They came out of the grave because they died again, like Lazarus.
Right.
Lazarus isn't here today. He died again. So what do you think about this scripture, that question?
Well, yeah, it says there that the tombs burst open, which is interesting. There's an earthquake there. When Christ dies on the cross, there's going to be great earthquakes when he returns to earth again. The creation is crying out and responding to its creator. But the tombs burst open. But it says there they came out of the tombs after the resurrection. So it seems to me like the tombs burst open when he dies, but they don't actually come out till after his resurrection. So It could be that they came back in mortal bodies, to die again, or it could be that they got kind of a preview of their glorified body and walked around for some period of time and then just kind of disappeared. So we don't really know, did they come back like Lazarus? Did they come back and then live out a life and actually die again? Or did these people just kind of appear for a while and then in a glorified body and walk around where people could see them and disappear? Which you think how that would have freaked people out back in that day? Did you see somebody? Hey, I was at that person. I was at their funeral last week or last month or a year ago or whenever. And these people are walking around. But I think what it is Jesus is the first fruits of those who are resurrected.
Right.
So his resurrection is the first, but these may have been the first people kind of after the first fruits to kind of give a preview of what's going to ultimately happen when Jesus comes back again. So there's a lot of powerful signs there at Jesus' death. You have the temple, the veil being torn in half. You have darkness that's over the earth. You have these tombs bursting open. So it's just a dramatic picture of God's power there at the death and resurrection of Jesus. But I tend to go with the view that these people came back in some kind of a temporary glorified body and then disappeared not long after that. It just kind of walked around for a while and just kind of give people a picture of the coming resurrection.
I've never thought about that, and I totally agree with that. That makes a lot more sense, that they were in their glorified bodies and they just went back, to heaven, because
Yes.
they were. Okay, so this is Kathy. Will we hear a literal trumpet with our physical ears, or will it be a spiritual sound? Is it possible that those who are not in Christ won't be able to hear it when the rapture takes place? What do you think about that?
Well, I think when the rapture occurs, there's going to be the trumpet, the voice of the archangel. I do think it's possible the unbelieving world may hear some of these things. Because you remember when Paul in Acts 9, when Saul of Tarsus was struck down, he was blinded. The people that were there, it says they heard the voice. They heard God's voice, but they couldn't understand what God was saying. It was a message for Paul, but they could hear it. And it scared them. It brought great fear on them. And you think about the dread in this world if when the rapture takes place, there's a trumpet sound that reverberates around the earth. I think it's possible when people come out of the tombs that have died, that their tombs may burst open, just as we saw in Matthew 27. Now, they don't have to, because those bodies will be glorified bodies. They could go right through the ground. But the tomb opened for Jesus. The tomb's open for these bodies to come out. I think it may be that some of these things happen on the earth, and just the dramatic, chilling impact that would have. It's going to be like the Night of the Living Dead or the zombies. People are going to be frightened when this takes place. So I don't know exactly what they will hear, but it would be consistent with what we have again, like in Acts chapter 9 and other places, that people in the world will hear something, and of course then these people disappear, and it's just going to add to the fear and the dread of people on the earth that this event's taking place, and can be used by God as well as an unbelievable evangelistic tool for many people to realize what's happened and come to faith in Christ. So we can't say that for sure, but it's very possible that they're going to be able to hear something.
Well, and you said it so well before, that when Jesus was resurrected the first time it happened, that they came out. And so it doesn't have to happen. I've had people ask me that question before, and I said, I don't know if the graves will be, disrupted, but I do know it would be neat if they were. Neat in the sense that it's a testimony that something cataclysmic just happened. And these people that were in these graves aren't there anymore.
Right.
I mean, there's physical evidence at that point that their bodies have been removed. So I think that's incredible. This is Diana. Upon the rapture, the dead in Christ will rise first. I thought when a believer dies, they go straight to heaven. I don't understand why they would need to be raptured. Will you please address this?
Yeah, well, there's two different things that happen when the rapture takes place. There's the rapture of people who are alive. We won't die. We're going to get an immortal, imperishable, incorruptible body in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. But those who've died, they're not going to be raptured. They're resurrected. Their bodies have died. Their body's going to be resurrected. And Diana's right here. When a believer dies, they do go straight to heaven. Their soul, the spirit, the immaterial part of that person goes to be with the Lord. The Apostle Paul said to be absent from the bodies, to be present with the Lord. He said in Philippians chapter 1, I want to depart and be with Christ, which is very much better. So the moment that a believer takes that second, they take that last breath, they're immediately in the Lord's presence. But what's happening at this event we call the rapture is those who've died, their bodies being resurrected. So their body's being resurrected, and the Lord's going to bring their perfected spirit with him, and that spirit and that body are going to be reunited at that point in time. So they're with the Lord. All that stayed here was the body. And it's the body that's going to be resurrected, reconstituted, and rejoined. Now, those of us who are alive, again, we're going to go up in a moment of time, and we're going to put on our new body, kind of like an overcoat over the old one. It's just going to envelop it. Yeah. But For those who've died, yeah, they do go straight to heaven. So what's being rejoined there is the body and the spirit. It's the body that gets resurrected.
Yeah, Jesus said to the thief on the cross, "Today you'll be with me in paradise."
Right.
And I had a group of people in my church, and they believed in soul sleep. Because it says, for those who have fallen asleep. Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4, he says, "I don't want you to be ignorant, brethren, about those who have fallen asleep." Well, that means their body is laying down like it's asleep in the grave, but their spirit is in the presence of Jesus.
Right.
Today you'll be with me in paradise. And so I believe my mom passed away about a month ago, and she was 94 years old, strong believer. Her body was, 94 years old, very frail, whatever. Well, we buried her body, but her spirit's in the presence of Jesus.
Right. Amen.
And one day that body will come out, and it won't be 94 years old, and it won't be frail. It'll be a resurrected body. That is a great question. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, Mark is going to be with me regularly, and you have your podcast coming out tomorrow, which is Marking the End Times. Fantastic podcast. I hope everybody listens to that. And Mark has a lot of books. If you want to go on Amazon.com and see Mark's books, there's a book that Mark wrote called The End, which is kind of a end times encyclopedia for me that I use. It's about that thick. Phenomenal book. Is there a website that people can go on to find out more about your ministry, Mark?
Well, my website's marklhitchcock.com. There's not tons of information on there, but there's a little bit. It's marklhitchcock.com. But basically, people want to look at the books I've written, just go to Amazon, or one of the other, or somewhere like that, put my name in, those books will come up. But The End, it's a big book, it's thick, but I think it's clear and simple. We tried to make it that way where it's not, I don't think it's an intimidating read about prophecy.
Oh, no.
So, that's a book that if someone's wanting to just kind of go from the beginning of how you interpret prophecy, why study prophecy, kind of all the way to, the eternal state and the New Jerusalem, that's a good book for people to get.
I reference it all the time. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for having me at the conference too. I enjoyed that immensely. It's great. It was great meeting so many of the folks who are members here at endtimes.com. I really enjoyed that fellowship greatly, and just it was very energizing and encouraging to me to be there.
Good. Well, you're a blessing there. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me. Now, Mark is going to be joining me on a regular basis doing shows like this, talking about the news, answering questions. And again, thank you guys that came to the conference. It's still available on endtimes.com. We streamed the whole thing, and now that's recorded, and you can buy that and watch it. I encourage you to do that. And remember the Pastor School that's coming up in several weeks, October the 10th through the 12th. I would love to have you be a part of that. You can go to pastorschool.com to get more information. Thanks for joining me today. God bless you.